Okay, week 7 Thursday. The only thing we've really got on our agenda is to start reading part 2 of Fahrenheit 451. So we begin where we left off on page 33, and we will get to page 37 today. Look at me remembering. It will be just after Mr. Montag has exited a train. So, yeah, like pretty much at the bottom of the page. So this sentence is the only one that we will not technically read today. That sentence is for tomorrow. So 33 to 37 is goals for today. But before you check out title of part 2, we should talk about real quick. The Sieve and the Sand. So this is one of the first titles of something that hasn't seemed to have a direct connection to fire, unlike the title of part 1 and the book, and even, spoiler alert, the title of part 3. The Sieve and the Sand is a analogy that Montag is going to establish in this section of the book. But of course, we must make sure we know what a sieve is. So I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with a colander, like the thing that you use to strain pasta. You know, you pour the water in the pasta into the colander and the water goes through the little holes. A sieve is kind of like that, except it's meant to strain solids from other solids. So if you've ever seen someone like panning for gold, then they would use a sieve to dump all of the dirt into, and they would sieve out the smaller dirt particles and hopefully get some gold in there. So that is what a sieve is. So create that mental picture whenever we reach that part, which will be today, actually. So when we left off, Montag showed his wife a whole bunch of illegal books, and he's asked for her help. So let's see how Montag's reading is going here. They read the long afternoon through, while the cold November rain fell from the sky upon the quiet house. They sat in the hall, because the parlor was so empty and gray-looking without its walls lit with orange and yellow confetti and skyrockets and women in gold mesh dresses and men in black velvet pulling 100-pound rabbits from silver hats. The parlor was dead, and Mildred kept peering in at it with a blank expression as Montag paced the floor and came back and squatted down and read a page as many as 10 times aloud. We cannot tell the precise moment when friendship is formed. As in filling a vessel drop by drop, there is at last a drop which makes it run over. So in a series of kindnesses, there is at last one which makes the heart run over. Montag sat listening to the rain. Is that what it was in the girl next door? I've tried so hard to figure. She's dead. Let's talk about someone alive, for goodness sake. Montag did not look back at his wife as he went trembling along the hall to the kitchen, where he stood a long time watching the rain hit the windows before he came back down the hall in the gray light, waiting for the tremble to subside. He opened another book, That Favorite Subject, Myself. He squinted at the wall. The favorite subject, myself. I understand that one, said Mildred. But Clarice's favorite subject wasn't herself. It was everyone else, and me. She was the first person in a good many years I've really liked. She was the first person I can remember who looked straight at me as if I counted. He lifted the 2 books. These men have been dead a long time, but I know their words point, one way or another, to Clarice. Outside the front door, in the rain, a faint scratching. Montag froze. He saw Mildred thrust herself back to the wall and gasp. Someone, the door. Why doesn't the door voice tell us? I shut it off. Under the doorsill, a slow probing sniff, an exhalation of electric steam. Mildred laughed. It's only a dog, that's what. You want me to shoo him away? Stay where you are. Silence, the cold rain falling, and the smell of blue electricity blowing under the locked door. Let's get back to work, said Montag quietly. Mildred kicked at a book. Books aren't people. You read and I look around, but there isn't anybody. He stared at the parlor that was dead and gray as the waters of an ocean that might teem with life if they switched on the electronic sun. Now, said Mildred, my family is people. They tell me things. I laugh. They laugh. And the colors. Yes, I know. And besides, if Captain Beatty knew about those books... She thought about it. Her face grew amazed, and then horrified. He might come and burn the house and the family. That's awful. Think of our investment. Why should I read? What for? What for? Why? Said Montag. I saw the damnedest snake in the world the other night. It was dead, but it was alive. It could see, but it couldn't see. You want to see that snake? It's at emergency hospital, where they filed a report on all the junk the snake got out of you. Would you like to go and check their file? Maybe you'd look under Guy Montag, or maybe under fear or war. Would you like to go to the house that burnt last night and rake ashes for the bones of the woman who set fire to her own house? What about Clarice McClellan? Where do we look for her? The morgue? Listen. The bombers crossed the sky and crossed the sky over the house, gasping, murmuring, whistling like an immense invisible fan circling in emptiness. Jesus, God, said Montag. Every hour, so many damn things in the sky. How in hell did those bombers get up there every single second of our lives? Why doesn't someone want to talk about it? We've started and won 2 atomic wars since 1960. Is it because we're having so much fun at home we've forgotten the world? Is it because we're so rich and the rest of the world's so poor and we just don't care if they are? I've heard rumors the world is starving, but we are well fed. Is it true the world works hard and we play? Is that why we're hated so much? I've heard the rumors about hate, too, once in a long while over the years. Do you know why? I don't, that's sure. Maybe the books can get us half out of the cave. They just might stop us from making the same damn insane mistakes. I don't hear those idiot bastards in your parlor talking about it. God, Millie, don't you see? An hour a day, 2 hours with these books, and maybe... The telephone rang. Mildred snatched the phone. Anne! She laughed. Yes, the White Clown's on tonight. Montag walked to the kitchen and threw the book down. Montag, he said, you're really stupid. Where do we go from here? Do we turn in the books? Forget it? He opened the book to read over Mildred's laughter. Poor Millie, he thought. Poor Montag. It's mud to you, too. But where do you get help? Where do you find a teacher this late? Hold on. He shut his eyes. Yes, of course. Again, he found himself thinking of the Green Park a year ago. The thought had been with him many times recently, but now he remembered how it was that day in the city park when he had seen that old man in the black suit hide something quickly in his coat. The old man leapt off as if to run, and Montag said, Wait! I haven't done anything, cried the old man, trembling. No one said you did. They had sat in the green soft light without saying a word for a moment, and then Montag talked about the weather. And then the old man responded with a pale voice. It was a strange, quiet meeting. The old man admitted to being a retired English professor who had been thrown out upon the world 40 years ago when the last liberal arts college shut for lack of students and patronage. His name was Faber, and when he finally lost his fear of Montag, he talked in a cadenced voice, looking at the sky and the trees and the green park. And when an hour had passed, he said something to Montag, and Montag sensed it was a rhymeless poem. Then the old man grew even more courageous and said something else, and that was a poem too. Faber held his hand over his left coat pocket and spoke these words gently, and Montag knew if he reached out, he might pull a book of poetry from the man's coat. But he did not reach out. His hand stayed on his knees, numbed and useless. I don't talk things, sir, said Faber. I talk the meaning of things. I sit here and know I'm alive. That was all there was to it, really. An hour of monologue, a poem, a comment, and then without even acknowledging the fact that Montag was a fireman, Faber, with a certain trembling, wrote his address on a slip of paper. For your file, he said, in case you decide to be angry with me. I'm not angry, Montag said, surprised. Mildred shrieked with laughter in the hall. Montag went to his bedroom closet and flipped open his file wallet to the heading Future Investigations. Faber's name was there. He hadn't turned it in, and he hadn't erased it. He dialed the call on a secondary phone. The phone on the far end of the line called Faber's name a dozen times before the professor answered in a faint voice. Montag identified himself and was met with a lengthy silence. Yes, Mr. Montag? Professor Faber, I have a rather odd question to ask. How many copies of the Bible are left in this country? I don't know what you're talking about. I want to know if there are any copies left at all. This is some sort of trap. I can't just talk to anyone on the phone. How many copies of Shakespeare and Plato? None. You know as well as I do. None. Faber hung up. Montag put down the phone. None. A thing he knew, of course, from the Firehouse listings, but somehow he had wanted to hear it from Faber himself. In the hall, Mildred's face was suffused with excitement. Well, the ladies are coming over. Montag showed her a book. This is the Old and New Testament, and Don't start that again. It might be the last copy in this part of the world. You've got to hand it back tonight, don't you know? Captain Beatty knows you've got it, doesn't he? I don't think he knows which book I stole, but how do I choose a substitute? Do I turn in Mr. Jefferson? Mr. Thoreau? Which is least valuable? If I pick a substitute and Beatty does know which book I stole, he'll guess we have an entire library here. Mildred's mouth twitched. See what you're doing? You'll ruin us. Who's more important, me or that Bible? She was beginning to shriek now, sitting there like a wax doll melting in its own heat. He could hear Beatty's voice. Sit down, Montag. Watch. Delicately, like the petals of a flower. Light the first page. Light the second page. Each becomes a black butterfly. Beautiful, eh? Light the third page from the second, and so on. Chain smoking, chapter by chapter. All the silly things the words mean. All the false promises. All the second-hand notions and time-worn philosophies. There sat Beatty, perspiring gently, the floor littered with swarms of black moss that had died in a single storm. Mildred stopped screaming as quickly as she started. Montag was not listening. There's only one thing to do, he said. Sometime before tonight, when I give the book to Beatty, I've got to have a duplicate made. You'll be here for the White Clown tonight, and the ladies coming over? Cried Mildred. Montag stopped at the door, with his back turned. Millie? A silence. What? Millie, does the White Clown love you? No answer. Millie, he licked his lips, does your family love you? Love you very much? Love you with all their heart and soul, Millie? He felt her blinking slowly at the back of his neck. Why'd you ask a silly question like that? He felt he wanted to cry, but nothing would happen to his eyes or his mouth. If you see that dog outside, said Mildred, give him a kick for me. He hesitated, listening at the door. He opened it and stepped out. Okay, so, pausing there as Montag exits his house. As we suspected, Montag and Mildred, neither of them have the skills to interpret complicated literature. They're lost, they're confused. The only thing Mildred relates to is that favorite subject myself, because she is indeed rather self-absorbed. So, going back. Okay. So they're reading, they're trying, and Montag is convinced that somehow these books explain Clarice. They explain the dysfunctions in his universe. In his country at least. In the meantime, there's a slight problem. There is a dog on the other side of the door. And based on Montag's reaction, we can assume that this is not a normal doggy. Most normal doggies do not exhale electric steam. So, presumably, the hound is lurking around Montag's house, probably up to no good. So, Montag definitely needs to keep an eye out. It seems that Beatty is finally really on to him for sure. So, of course, Mildred, the only thing she's concerned about is, oh, what if they burn my precious television sets? Ah! But Montag has a slightly more existential crisis going on. He's concerned about his wife's suicide. He's concerned about the woman who burnt herself. He's concerned about Clarice, who was killed. He's concerned about the war that's going on. These jet planes in the background. They just come up every now and then, just these random recurrences of the jet planes flying through the sky. We never really find out who the war is with, what it's about. It's just sort of there in the background. We find out about world poverty. We find out about the perception of America. We're hated so much, apparently, in the future. So anyways, point being that Montag has some serious global concerns that he's trying to deal with, and he thinks that these books from the past can help him understand those things. Maybe, maybe not. We will have to see. Now, Mildred is much more concerned with her television show, The White Clown. So excited about that. But Montag, who desperately needs a teacher to help him, has a memory, and he's alluded to this memory a couple of times, very, very briefly. But now we find out more about the old man named Faber. So, at last, here is a book where an English professor can be a hero when no one understands literature anymore because it has been phased out of society. An English professor has a unique skill set. Look at that. Now, funny thing, Faber and Montag, these names were chosen intentionally. Ray Bradbury did not just make them up. Faber was actually the name of a pencil company in the 1950s, and Montag was the name of a paper company back in the 1950s. So, paper, pencil, ta-da! So, presumably, when these two characters come together, something is going to happen. So even though this memory with Faber has Faber being, a little brave, quoting some poetry, Faber seems absolutely terrified on the phone. Oh, this must be a trap. I mean, it's a reasonable suspicion, right? A fireman calls your house and asks how many copies of a book there are. What are you going to say? Oh, yeah, there's 5 copies over at my friend Bob's house, So, I mean, obviously, Professor Faber has reasons to be suspicious because of Montag's career and his position. But of course, Montag is serious, and he has something potentially incredible in this country. Montag may have the last copy of the Bible in America at this time in the future. So, of course, Mildred doesn't seem to be impressed. Who's more important, me or that Bible? I can't think that there's many of us who would choose Mildred over the Bible, whether you are religious or not. But anyways, point being that Montag knows this book is valuable, even though, presumably he's never read it before, and he wants to have a duplicate made of the Bible to preserve it so that it is not lost to history. And I like the kind of thematic emphasis that we're getting on certain kind of intangible, important qualities in life. We've had a lot of discussion about happiness. Clarice's question, are you happy? And that morphed into Beatty's idea of equality. And now we're getting love. When Montag hears Millie, obsessing about her television shows, he really tries to get through to her. He's like, let's talk about what's important here. Can your television shows love you? Obviously the answer is no. And the implication, of course, being that maybe you should focus on something in life that can love you. Maybe you should care more about me. I could love you if you were less of a horrific person who wants to kick dogs and stuff. So Millie definitely has her priorities not sorted correctly. Okay, now Montag is about to take a ride over to Faber's house. That is his intention. He is going to be riding on the subway, and he's going to start making some mistakes. We've seen the stress that Montag is under these past few scenes. He's starting to get more angry, more explosive as the book is going on, more frustrated. So now we're really seeing that kind of hit a high point here. Okay, Montag has exited the house. The rain had stopped, and the sun was setting in the clear sky. The street and the lawn and the porch were empty. He let his breath go in a great sigh. He slammed the door. He was on the subway. I'm numb, he thought. When did the numbness really begin? In my face? In my body? The night I kicked the pill bottle in the dark, like kicking a buried mine. The numbness will go away, he thought. It'll take time, but I'll do it, or Faber will do it for me. Someone, somewhere, will give me back the old face and the old hands the way they were. Even the smile, he thought, the old burnt-in smile. That's gone. I'm lost without it. The subway fled past him. Cream tile, jet black, cream tile, jet black, numerals and darkness, more darkness, and the total adding itself. Once, as a child, he had sat upon a yellow dune by the sea in the middle of the blue and hot summer day, trying to fill a sieve with sand, because some cruel cousin had said, fill this sieve and you'll get a dime. And the faster he poured, the faster it sifted through with a hot whispering. His hands were tired, the sand was boiling, the sieve was empty. Seated there in the midst of July, without a sound, he felt the tears move down his cheeks. Now, as the vacuum underground rushed him through the dead cellars of town, jolting him, he remembered the terrible logic of that sieve, and he looked down and saw that he was carrying the Bible open. There were people in the suction train, but he held the book in his hands, and the silly thought came to him, if you read fast and read all, maybe some of the sand will stay in the sieve. But he read, and the words fell through, and he thought, in a few hours there will be Beatty. And here will be me handing this over, so no phrase must escape me. Each line must be memorized. I will myself to do it. He clenched the book in his fists. Trumpets blared. Denham's dentifrice. Shut up, thought Montag. Consider the lilies of the field. Denham's dentifrice. They toil not. Denham's. Consider the lilies of the field. Shut up. Dentifrice. He tore the book open and flicked the pages and felt them as if he were blind. He picked at the shape of the individual letters, not blinking. Denham's, spelled D-E-N. They toil not, neither do they, a fierce whisper of hot sand through empty sieve. Denham's does it. Consider the lilies, the lilies, the lilies. Denham's dental detergent. Shut up. It was a plea, a cry so terrible that Montag found himself on his feet, the shocked inhabitants of the loud car staring, moving back from this man with the insane, gorged face, the gibbering, dry mouth, the flapping book in his fist. The people who had been sitting a moment before, tapping their feet to the rhythm of Denham's dentifrice, Denham's dandy dental detergent, Denham's dentifrice, dentifrice, dentifrice. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The people whose mouths had been faintly twitching the words dentifrice, dentifrice, dentifrice. The train radio vomited upon Montag in retaliation, a great ton-load of music made of tin, copper, silver, chromium, and brass. The people were pounded into submission. They did not run. There was no place to run. The great air train fell down its shaft in the earth. Lilies of the field. Denham's! Lilies, I said. The people stared. Call the guard. The man's off. No view, the train hissed to its stop. No view, a cry. Denham's, a whisper. Montag's mouth barely moved. Lilies. The train door whistled open. Montag stood. The door gasped, starting shut. Only then did he leap past the other passengers, screaming in his mind, plunged through the slicing door only in time. He ran on the white tiles, up through the tunnels, ignoring the escalators, because he wanted to feel his feet move, arms swing, lungs clench, unclench, feel his throat go raw with air. A voice drifted after him. Denham's, Denham's, Denham's. The train hissed like a snake. The train vanished in its hole. All right. So that's where we will stop just before Montag meets Faber, or reacquaints himself with Faber, rather. Subway! So Montag is indeed losing it just a bit. Okay, well, let's talk about Montag's mistakes first, and then we'll address the title of the section. So Montag is sitting on the train, and he's carrying the Bible open. Now, this is not a society that's known for being especially observant, but if anyone realized, oh my God, that guy is sitting there with an illegal book, well, presumably, that could be a problem for Montag. So sitting there with the book open, that's a whoopsie. Then, as he's being distracted by this irritating toothpaste commercial, that's what dentifrice is, it's just an old-fashioned word for toothpaste, he starts to get very frustrated, to the point where he starts to yell, shut up, at the toothpaste commercial. Now, anyone, for any reason, who starts yelling at a commercial, typically not viewed so well by the rest of society. So he's standing on his feet, yelling at the radio commercial that's being broadcasted in the train. People are definitely noticing now. If they didn't notice him before, they're definitely noticing him now. So, few little mistakes by Montag there, but hopefully Faber will be able to help him a bit, and maybe that will ease some of his frustration so that he doesn't get turned into the authorities. But let's address the title of the section. Sieve Sand. So Montag tells us this memory. We've had a few memories from him so far. The memory of him and his mom with the candle. I think there was another one. Maybe we haven't got to it yet. But anyways, here we have a memory of him at the beach. And Montag is obviously possessed of some kind of sadistic family members because he was bribed, he was dared, manipulated, however you want to say it, into attempting to fill a sieve with sand. Now, sand particles are teensy-weensy, and a sieve has holes in it. So, yeah, it's kind of a useless mission. It is the essence of futility to attempt to fill something with holes with, teensy-weensy little particles. So the reason that he thinks of this memory is because of what he's doing on the train. He's already said that he wants to create a duplicate of the Bible. But I mean, we don't know how that's going to work out. Maybe Faber will refuse to help him. Maybe he won't know how to create a duplicate. I mean, the Bible's a rather long book. Maybe they just won't have time to do it. So Montag starts to have this insane thought. The silly thought came to him. If you read fast and read all, maybe some of the sand will stay in the sieve. So in this case, the analogy here is that the sieve, in this case, is his mind, his brain, which he is attempting to fill with the words of the Bible. That is the sand. All of the individual words of the Bible are the little pieces of sand. So in the same way that in his childhood memory, he was frustrated and saddened because he felt like it was an impossible task, which it was, he is now once again frustrated and saddened because he's trying to commit the words of the Bible to his mind, and they're just whoosh, just whooshing right through his brain. Nothing is sticking. So if you're familiar with any of the verses in the Bible, the kind of chant that he has going on here about the lilies of the field. Consider the lilies of the field. They toil not, neither do they spin. That's from the book of Matthew in the Bible, and that's what Montag is reading in that moment. So Montag tried to memorize the Bible. Didn't go very well. He only had a short subway ride, and, the Bible's a big book. So he is now finally at Faber's house, and we will pick up with Mr. Faber tomorrow.